My name is Mandy Hill, and I'm going to be your instructor for this semester for mathematical reasoning. In Chapter 1, we just really cover Section 1 in Chapter 1 and talk about some basic principles in math that you wouldn't think this is math, but people use to make arguments. And one thing about math is it's got to make sense, and so there has to be actual proof to support some of these claims, and that's where we get into logic. And so logic is a study of the methods and principles of reasoning. An argument, and if you're on social media much lately, there's lots of arguing going on, but an argument uses a set of facts or assumptions called premises to support a conclusion. And what we're going to be talking about a lot today are different kinds of fallacies. And a fallacy is a deceptive argument, an argument in which the conclusion is not well supported by the premises. Okay, so there's a lot of different kind of fallacies. The first one we're going to talk about is the appeal to popularity. Okay, so basically this says many people believe P is true. So many people believe something is true, therefore it must be true. Okay, so here's an example of the appeal to popularity. Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. More people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck. Okay, so the premise is more people drive Ford pickup trucks than any other light truck. Well, okay, but they're trying to make that say that Ford makes the best pickup trucks in the world. Okay, this argument suffers from the fallacy of appeal to popularity, in which the fact that the large number of people believe or act some way is used inappropriately as evidence that the belief or action is correct. Okay, just because more people drive Ford pickups than any other light truck doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. It might be the most affordable, so more people buy it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. That's the appeal to popularity. Okay. The next one is false cause. So false cause says that A comes before B. So something happens before something else, therefore A must have caused B. Okay, so I placed the quartz crystal on my forehead, and in 5 minutes my headache was gone. The crystal made my headache go away. Okay, so we already can talk about the fact that not necessarily. You could have taken some ibuprofen an hour ago, and that could have made your headache go away. There's lots of things that could have happened besides putting the quartz crystal on your head that made your headache go away. So the premise is I placed the quartz crystal on my head, and another premise is that 5 minutes later my headache was gone, therefore the crystal made my headache go away. Well, that's false cause, because not necessarily. This argument suffers from the fallacy of false cause, in which the fact that one event came before another is incorrectly taken as evidence that the first event caused the second event. Okay, appeal to ignorance. There is no proof that P is true, therefore P is false. Okay, so basically they use the example of aliens. Scientists have not found any concrete evidence of aliens visiting Earth. Therefore, anyone who claims to have seen a UFO must be hallucinating. Well, the premise is no proof that aliens have visited the Earth. The conclusion, aliens have not visited the Earth. Well, that lacks a proof of alien visits does not mean that that visits have not occurred. Okay, so that's all. And I have not seen any palm trees here, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any, correct? Somebody somewhere in Arkansas could have a palm tree growing in their yard. Okay, so that's not enough. It's not a good enough argument to make that aliens have not visited the Earth. Now, I personally do not think that aliens have visited the Earth, but I can't use this argument, okay? Another one is hasty generalization. Hasty generalization is actually used a lot. And when you're using that, A and B are linked one or a few times, therefore A causes B. Okay, this is a lot of science experiments and things like this try to use, okay, I can link these things together, so therefore I'm going to say that this proves something else happens. Okay, so the example that they give is 2 cases of childhood leukemia have occurred along the street where the high voltage power lines run. The power lines must be the cause of these illnesses. So they've linked 2 things together. They've linked childhood leukemia to these high voltage power lines, okay? The premise of this argument cites 2 cases. Well, 2 cases of leukemia, but 2 cases is just simply not enough to make a strong connection between those 2. Now, it is a coincidence that happened, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those 2 cases are caused by this high voltage power line. It would need to be many more children on that street. The fallacy here is hasty generalization, in which a conclusion is drawn from an inadequate number of cases or cases that have not been sufficiently analyzed. Okay. There's a lot of sports fanatics that will say, I'm wearing this bracelet on my arm last time I won the game, so next time I'm going to wear this bracelet on my arm because it'll make me win the game. Okay, that's a hasty generalization because there's not enough evidence that that's what's happening, right? Limited choice, okay? Limited choice. P is false, therefore only Q can be true. So just by saying something is false, then we can say something else is true. So you don't support the president, so you are not a patriotic American. Well, the premise is you don't support the president. The conclusion is you are not a patriotic American. This fallacy is called limited choice because it artificially precludes choices that ought to be considered. Okay, so we have an election cycle every 4 years, and I'm pretty sure there's always strong opinions about whether people like the president or they don't like the president, and they may not support the president, but they still may be a patriotic American, okay? You can't say just because this thing happens that it leads to this. Okay. Another one is appeal to emotion. This is used a whole lot in commercials. If P is associated with a positive emotional response, it's true. Okay, so in ads for Michelin tires, a picture of a baby is shown with the words, because so much is riding on your tires. Well, basically the premise is you love your baby, right? So you should buy Michelin tires. Well, they're appealing to your emotion. The advertisers hope that the love you feel for a baby will make you want to buy their tires. This attempt to evoke an emotional response as a tool of persuasion represents the fallacy of appeal to emotion. Okay. A lot of commercials are going to use that appeal to emotion. Next, we've got a personal attack. I have a problem with a person or group claiming P, therefore P is not true. Okay, so Gwen says, you should stop drinking because it's hurting your grades, endangering people when you drink and drive, and destroying your relationship with your family. So Merle says, I've seen you drink a few too many on occasion yourself. Merle has resorted to attacking Gwen personally rather than arguing logically. So we will call this fallacy a personal attack. So I have a problem with the person or group claiming P. So Merle really doesn't like Gwen. So therefore, he's got a problem with Gwen. So therefore, he says, whatever she's saying, it's just not true. And to be honest with you, that happens a lot. If we don't like somebody, then we just have strong reactions to whatever they say, and we just, well, that's coming from so and so, so it must not be true. Circular reasoning is a very popular one, and this is where people get into arguments, and it just keeps going and keeps going because they're using circular reasoning. They're saying if P is true, then P is restated in different words. The argument states the conclusion, okay? So basically, this person just says something, then they say it in a different way, but they're still saying the same thing, and they just keep saying that same thing over and over and over again, okay? So circular reasoning, here's an example. Society has an obligation to provide health insurance because healthcare is a right of citizenship. Okay, so the argument states the conclusion, society has an obligation to provide health insurance, before the premise, healthcare is a human right. But if you read carefully, you'll recognize that the premise and the conclusion both say essentially the same thing. They're saying society has an obligation to provide health insurance, and healthcare is a right of citizenship. Well, those two statements are pretty much the exact same thing. So they're just saying the same thing over and over again, and then saying, well, then that's true, right? So this argument, therefore, suffers from circular reasoning. Okay, here's another one that we see a lot. A diversion, which it's also called a red herring. P is related to Q, and I have an argument concerning Q, therefore P is true. Okay, we should not continue to fund cloning research because there are so many ethical issues involved. Decisions are based on ethics, and we cannot afford to have too many ethical loose ends. Okay, so basically they're saying, we shouldn't fund cloning because we have a problem that there's too many ethical issues, and we don't want to have too many ethical loose ends. So this argument begins with its conclusion: we should not continue to fund cloning research. However, the discussion is all about ethics. The argument represents the fallacy of diversion. So if they were going to say we should not continue to fund cloning research, then they would need to actually maybe say the ethical issues that were driving that decision, like what problems arise when you're trying to clone, like you're going to clone another human being, what kind of things, what kind of problems are going to come up, what kind of ethical problems. So you just can't say just because there's ethical issues, or we can't do it. You need to say what the ethical issues are to have a valid argument. So this is a diversion or a red herring. They're trying to just distract from the argument. Straw man, another very popular one. I have an argument concerning a distorted version of P, therefore I hope you are fooled into concluding I have an argument concerning the real version of P. So suppose that the mayor of a large city proposes decriminalizing drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on enforcement. His challenger in the upcoming election says the mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, but I do. Okay, so he's using part of what's being said to talk about the mayor. The mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, but I do. But actually, the mayor's, let's read back what he says. It says the mayor of a large city proposes decriminalizing drug possession in order to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on enforcement. So he's not saying that he thinks it's okay to use drugs. He's saying that he's doing that because he wants to reduce overcrowding in jails and save money on enforcement. So his statement, the mayor doesn't think there's anything wrong with drug use, well, it's just telling a part of the truth, right? The mayor did not say that drug use is acceptable. His proposal for decriminalization is designed to solve another problem, overcrowding of jails, and tells us nothing about his general views on drug use. The speaker's distorted the mayor's views. Any argument based on the distortion of someone's views or beliefs is called straw man. Okay, and that's used a whole lot. People want to pull a little bit of something that somebody says and really change the wording and make you think that that's what that person really means.
I'm a big old bag of fast food trash. Nature lover here has had his fill. Now he wants to set me free. Oh. Hey, if you got cut rate insurance, you're gonna be paying for this yourself. So get off!
The slippery slope fallacy. When a relatively insignificant first event leads to more significant events until some ultimate significant event is reached, whereas the connections of the events are improbable. A trash bag or a man getting hit by multiple cars and flying off a cliff is not due to not having Allstate insurance. People probably do that no matter what insurance they have. Most likely State Farm.
I put a Pepsi in the motion, and that's your stuff to use. Hey, you're the Pepsi generation. Girls are down, taste the thrill of the day. Let's feel the Pepsi way. Taste the thrill of the day.
The gist of the commercial is the kids drink Pepsi and they got to meet Michael Jackson and dance like him too. How fun. There are a couple fallacies that fit here, but the one we're going to focus on is the false analogy, which means that because two things are alike in one or more respects, they are alike in some other respect. They were dancing, then they drank Pepsi, then they met Michael Jackson, and learned to dance like him too. Therefore, this all happened because they drank Pepsi. So drink Pepsi.
This is the joy for me. I love bread. I love bread. I now just manage it, so I don't deny myself bread. I have bread every day. I have bread every day. That's the genius of this program. I lost 26 pounds, and I have eaten bread every single day.
You love bread, we get it. Geez, Oprah. An authority appeal fallacy. If an authority figure said so, it must be true. So the main idea of this commercial is
I love bread. I love bread.
so Oprah is professing her love to bread because she lost 20-something pounds on Weight Watchers. Because the program is so great, we can trust this information because Oprah is a celebrity. She is an authority figure. So therefore, if she says it, it must be true. You get some bread. You get a loaf of bread. I get a loaf of bread. We all get a loaf of bread.
Okay, let's see if you can do this. I've got a few examples here. Prison overcrowding is a crisis that we must alleviate through increased use of capital punishment. So which fallacy is that? The senator is a member of the National Rifle Association, so I'm sure she opposes a ban on large capacity magazines for ammunition. My uncle never drank alcohol and lived to be 93 years old. That's how I know that avoiding alcohol leads to a greater longevity. All nurses in Belvedere Hospital are women, so women are better qualified for medical jobs. Okay, so just think about those for a minute and see if you can figure out which fallacy you think goes with each one of those. Now, do keep in mind that sometimes fallacies can go with more than one. Like you could probably justify two fallacies for each one of these. So if I don't pick the exact ones that you pick, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong, as long as you can make a good argument for it. Okay, so this is what I kind of think. Prison overcrowding is a crisis that we must alleviate through increased use of capital punishment. Well, is that the only choice we have? You know, that's a pretty, way out there statement. So I'm sure that there's probably some other choices we have. The senator is a member of the National Rifle Association, so I'm sure she opposes a ban on large capacity magazines for ammunition. Right? Well, that's just because she's a member of a National Rifle Association doesn't mean that you can make every statement about guns and say that you know what she thinks on those things. Okay, so they're kind of drawing a mistruth because they don't know that for sure. My uncle never drank alcohol and lived to be 93 years old. That's how I know that avoiding alcohol leads to a greater longevity. Well, it could be lots of other things too, right? So that's false cause. All nurses in Belvedere Hospital are women, so women are better qualified for medical jobs. That's a hasty generalization, right? Just because there are a lot of nurses or all the nurses in that hospital are women doesn't necessarily mean that men are not as qualified to work in medical jobs. So we've got to be very careful when we're evaluating media information. 5 steps to evaluating media information. Consider the source. Is the source of the information clear? Does the source have credibility on this issue? This is one of those things that, you just can't believe everything you see on the internet or that comes out on Facebook. Check the date. Can you determine when the information was written? Is it still relevant or is it outdated? Okay, something that happened 10 years ago might not necessarily be what's true today. Validate accuracy. Can you validate the information from other sources? Do you have a good reason to believe it is accurate? Does it contain anything that makes you suspicious? Okay, you want to watch for hidden agendas. Is the information presented fairly and objectively, or is it manipulated to serve some particular or hidden agenda? Okay, this happens a lot in politics. Number 5, don't miss the big picture. Even if a piece of media information passes all the above tests, step back and consider whether it makes sense. For example, does it conflict with other things you think are true? And if so, how can you resolve that with the conflict? Okay, so when you pull a small piece of information out, you've got to make sure that it makes sense in the big picture, or else someone might be telling you a falsehood.